morning. It's been about 18 years now that I've been a product engineer and worked across software leadership roles. And for the last 2.5 years, I've been building teams and products to help developers, founders, and other creatives leverage Near Protocol, a decentralized open source computing platform to bring Web3 capabilities into their application experiences. And until about 2 weeks ago, I did this as a senior engineering manager at a company called Pagoda. But as part of the Near ecosystem, as it continues to step towards mature decentralization, Pagoda is shutting down and breaking up into smaller, more focused companies. And I am now in the entrepreneur and residency program at the Near Foundation. And I'm thrilled to be back at LeadDev, speaking here for the first time, to share with you the 3 core anchors of my philosophy on how to deliver products faster with confidence that they deliver the value that you hope for and that your business expects. And I have to say that because I may speak to different parts of consumer product verticals on Near Protocol, including decentralized financial services, which are a way to handle money and other stores of value without a centralized bank, that this is not financial advice. It's purely educational and based off of my experiences working in this space. And by the end of the time today, I hope that you feel empowered by collaboration rituals and development tools that you can use to build faster with greater confidence, that you're building what your users need. And on this agenda here, I included a link to a Telegram chat that I started before I realized we have like a networking room. So if there's any conversation that you'd like to have, you can join this group and we can continue that later if needed. Let's start with a visualization exercise to get us grounded in thinking about what does it take to build and deliver impactful software. Please close your eyes and visualize a list and add onto your list each essential task for iterative software development. As you're adding tasks onto this list, take a count and estimate how many items are on this list, and keep that number in mind. And open your eyes and just take a moment and share that number with your neighbors. Thank you. I hear some whispering. Show of hands, how many people had a number that was relatively close to what your neighbor said? Kind of far away, a couple people? All right, I think that even if you had a number that were not very far off, there will be enough difference in our opinions of what it takes to deliver software and to move software from local machine to production, that it's worth coming to a shared mental model of the essential activities of iterative software development. Moving code along this, I like to think of it as a spectrum from product idea to code on a local machine to production with quality and confidence requires that we do many things many times over prior to signing off on a product being ready enough for users. And competing with all of these tasks are the finite resources of time, focus, and frustration capital. And given the different perspectives on what should be included on your list and when and how to do each activity, in order to work cohesively, it's imperative that your product squad come to a shared understanding of what these activities look like when done well, and organize them into feedback loops to be repeated as our software incrementally builds towards functionally complete user flows. To align on these activities and group them to feedback loops, we should ask several questions. Start this conversation to document your product squad's list of essential activities and discuss with them where in this list should we over-communicate with our squad to provide detailed clarification and align on expectations on what the outcome of each activity should look like when it's done well, or how things might go wrong. And especially if the roles of your engineering org are more fluid, with leads and engineering managers becoming more hands-on based on the project's needs, consider where within your product squad's list of activities should you spend 80% of your time versus 20% in order for you to work and deliver most impactfully. Also, lean into over-communicating when your product squad includes developers, designers, or product managers who are earlier in their career, or if there have been recent changes to your team and you're still finding the best ways to work together. You're still in that gelling state of forming a new team. I also forgot to mention here that all of these QR codes that I'll show on these slides will be links to kind of expand on any content that you see here or give examples to go into detail any deeper. And although your list of essential activities may vary from what I suggest here, I think there'll be 3 core elements that you'll see repeated across these. There's activities, that's an easy one, that's a given. There's tools, and there's time. Activities, aligning your product squad on the shared understanding to make sure that everyone is aligned on what you need to do, regardless of their role, design, product, or engineer, and organizing these into feedback loops, which each include end user or stakeholder feedback, because it's important to get that feedback regularly as you're moving through these stages. Tools, a shared understanding of the latest trusted tools available for you to build faster, and time, that every role within your product squad take initiative to demonstrate a concern for time. What might it look like to demonstrate a concern for time? Well, that's essentially asking questions. Ask questions which help analyze how your product's opportunity and value add to your users might become diminished over time, whether based on some external factors or if the desired impact is inversely proportional to the passing of time, as it often is. For example, perhaps a project is actually only worth the effort if you can get it into your users' hands within 2 months. I'm convinced of these 3 anchors: activities, tools, and time, because I've experienced them multiple times over, and that reinforce them such that they're now philosophy on how I manage myself and my approach towards serving my teams. And that's with the focus on short development iterations with minimal overhead and built-in feedback loops, discovering and sharing AI agents and open source tools that essentially encapsulate the complete development iterations and feedback loops of other teams, allowing you to build upon their work, and that every member of a product squad demonstrate an understanding that everything we do is time sensitive. Now, I've experienced these most recently during a project to build a new rendering engine that intended to be the next generation pattern for building UIs that leverage Near's open web tech stack. Next generation, meaning that this was a version 2.0 step from an existing 1.0 rendering engine that was in use by our developer community to host UIs on Near for managed infrastructure and decentralized redundancy of frontends. These 2 versions had one thing in common. They both fetch React-style code that had been stored in plain text on chain on a contract, enforce some security constraints, and convert that into React-style object model, DOM object model, that a browser could then render. Actually, I had originally planned to focus the majority of this chat on this version 2.0 tool called React on Chain, and the process of building it, and that everyone should use it, it's amazing. But this story became more interesting from multiple angles because during development, we encountered signals from our developer community that prompted us to drastically change our roadmap. Show of hands if you've experienced or heard of the sunken cost fallacy. Yes, of course. After we wrap up here, we're going to go on a little break, right, and socialize, make some new connections. This could be a good conversation starter. Ask someone about the most recent time they realized, or should have realized, that they were experiencing the fallacy of sunken costs. Now back to the story on building this next generation rendering engine. We wanted to improve Near Protocol's recommended pattern for building and deploying decentralized UIs. Decentralized, so there's lots of different ways people can do things and get their code out there. This is one of the patterns that we are highly promoting. But why did we need to do this project at all? There are already so many ways to quickly move code from your local machine to some managed infrastructure provider to make a UI available to users around the world. Why would we spend time to build yet another way to deploy a UI to a managed hosting infrastructure? And that's because this is decentralized open source software. The platform is permissionless and accessible for anyone to build upon it and promote their work and grow communities. And that's what people have done here. Developer creativity knows no bounds. Builders and entrepreneurs are keen to find new ways to do existing things in a manner that best fits their need. Before my company became involved in designing patterns for building UIs which leverage Near's infrastructure, our community of open source developers building on Near started it first. These counts show the number of developers building on the UI layer of Near. This counts just the UI layer, not deployed contracts or any other part of the stack. And these counts have multiplied since the launch of 1.0, and it just reflects the popularity of developers creating UIs, promoting communities, creating UIs and functional components, and sharing them and reusing them. Storing a UI on chain is another way to quickly deploy to manage infrastructure, and we found that it is primarily appealing for developers who value open source software or decentralization. Decentralized UIs are less susceptible to single points of failure, making them more resistant to attacks and server downtimes. They demonstrate the value of open source and more open web, where transaction fees and royalties provide an alternative to advertising-based revenue streams. Another benefit that we found is that users might trust a decentralized application more, knowing that its operations are more transparent and publicly verifiable. There's more details on some of the pros and cons of traditional Web 2 UIs versus decentralized Web 3 UIs, and a popular example that uses the VM 1.0 style at the link here. And as you're looking at these links and seeing documentation, you might notice that we refer to UIs deployed on Near in many different ways, from Near components, Near.js, Boss components. Boss was an acronym that was started about a year ago when this launched. Didn't quite connect. Don't get confused as you see that. It's all referring to the same thing. So how did this project play out? In March of 2023, UI components with VM 1.0 were promoted as the recommended pattern for building UIs on Near. In April 2023 at Pagoda, we formed a team to lead the effort to build this next generation rendering engine to address these limitations of version 1.0. And from May to December, the team grew from 1 to 3 developers and made progress towards the 2.0 roadmap. And while we were delivering on our incremental milestones and having some early successes, such as adding TypeScript, defining a pattern for importing arbitrary packages from the web, reaching and then surpassing the feature parity of version 1.0, as we're hitting these milestones, all these little nerd faces pop up, and those represent our ecosystem of developers. They continue to innovate, contributing to fixing code to address limiting capabilities in their own way. For example, TypeScript support was added by a library called Alim. Use state and use hooks were added into VM 1.0, which used React style code, but it wasn't essentially React, but began to reach feature parity to kind of more mimic React. And modular support for arbitrary code was added, which in theory is a path that could unlock support for arbitrary dependencies, but it wasn't widely used. During these early development phases, we primarily had 2 instances of collecting feedback from developers on 2.0. One in late February during our alpha release, where we invited early users to start testing, and in May as we prepared for the beta launch. At a team offsite in early May, we huddled to focus on signal from our developer community that the core value prop of version 2.0 might be misaligned with most pressing needs of our developer community. We found that the aspects of the 1.0 UI pattern that developers found valuable are those which could be easily achieved and more effectively without building a new framework if we let go of one single value prop, affording developers with more secure composability of community-contributed UI components. Secure composability meaning we wanted more secure constructs that would allow developers to import into their UI components that were authored by other users at a lower risk of that component doing something malicious like accessing user data or exposing some other risk to their users. In addition to user feedback, data on Near UI components showed that there were actually low instances of developer leveraging components authored by others. And this made it clear that secure composability need not be an essential value proposition that was worth further pursuit. So what did we learn? Time. We learned that we didn't give enough consideration to how the passing of time during development of this next-gen engine would correlate to changes in the most pressing needs of UI builders on Near, especially because we're open source and people were building new ways to do things and trying things out. And our activities. Although we attempted to validate by regularly shipping something, even if it were just technical docs or documenting public discussions and trying to encourage engagement in those discussions, this was done passively with insufficient gathering of developer feedback. So you should regularly conduct user interviews to ensure the product is still the best solution to a business-critical user problem. Ideally, you've built up a list of contacts with people who match your ideal user profile, so you can engage with the same group throughout the development stages. Our early pivot was actually a benefit because it allowed us to identify from user interviews with some of our most prolific builders that their primary need for an improved UI layer on Near were tools that we could actually deliver on a much shorter time frame. So we built another pattern that would allow people to deploy UIs on-chain called chain-hosted UIs. And the main difference here was we let go of that secure composability proposition, and we also allow developers to bring any Vite-supported framework that they use to build their app to create their bundles, deploy them on-chain, and ship those. We also identified that one of the pain points our users had were in leveraging one of our libraries that allow them to interact with the Near protocol blockchain via JavaScript. So they needed a greater variety of JavaScript modules and functions available to them, and we were able to shift gears to focus on those two and have a greater impact delivered to our users in less time. So we've talked about activities, time, and this third anchor on my philosophy to build efficiently is tools. By utilizing actively maintained open source libraries, components, and AI agents, these tools allow you to essentially outsource development iterations and increase the number of feedback loops that your product squad can benefit towards as you incrementally step towards your milestones. Here's a list of some of the tools, and these are all focused on tools that are in the Near ecosystem. Of course, you can look at any other tools, especially AI agents. There's lots of companies even out here that have tools to help you do things like write tests faster. I'm focusing on these because these are the ones that I'm most familiar with in these last couple of years. And I like to think of this similar to how our public library system makes essential knowledge and technology services available to all without requiring that you purchase anything and without selling your personal data. Public good tools and services on Near protocol are intended to put the power of a full suite of technology to the benefits of users and communities, and to drive communities that accelerate creativity in a publicly accessible way. The full stack of tools span from educational resources, SDKs, UI libraries, AI service providers, and reference implementations to the upcoming AI developer, which will enable prompt-based development of complete end-to-end applications. A couple examples to highlight here are Create Near app to quickly get started building an end-to-end app that gives you patterns for having a contract deployed on chain, interacting with that contract from the UI, and KeyPalm and other onboarding tools that we have that allow you to essentially abstract the details away of the technology that's involved, to allow your users to quickly drop into an application experience, perhaps by just sending them one link, and completely hiding that there's even a blockchain involved, and requiring that they accomplish a certain number of actions before they have any need to dig into anything that could otherwise put them off of the experience, like having to navigate wallets or seed phrases. Most of the tools that we have here, actually a common thread between all of these tools, is that focus on abstracting away those complexities to allow you to focus on the details of the actual experience that you want to offer to your users. Again, those three anchors here: activities, time, and tools, especially leaning towards the actively maintained open source libraries. All of these tools have trended towards Near protocol having an increasing number of developers and creatives building upon it. And just to give you an indication of what this looks like, here are the product verticals of popular Web3 capabilities that bring developers and founders onto Near protocol. Bringing Web3 capabilities into a user experience, it doesn't require building the majority of your stack on chain. It's incorporating the piece that's relevant to the experience that you're trying to build. And that affords, bringing Web3 capabilities affords, offering a focus on privacy, ownership and governance by user, bringing a low cost to switch to different platforms if needed, and bringing censorship resistance and reducing the single points of failure. And this has translated to Near becoming one of the most mainstream blockchains for consumer applications. We have 2 dApps in the top 5 on dApp radar in terms of weekly active users, and 3 in the top 15. Just wanted to share this to connect how the plethora of tools that we've created have translated into actual applications that are driving consumer adoption across different segments. Of course, decentralized finance, to AI apps, social, general infrastructure, and gaming. And if you're interested in discovering a bit more about the type of applications and creating your own apps, you can actually do that directly. This is a permissionless, decentralized platform. You can discover these applications and contribute your own on this link here. And thank you for your time.